everybody, today I wanted to make a video about two Beatles box sets. They are a Volume 1 and a Volume 2, and they happen to be the Beatles Capitol Albums Volume 1, Capitol Albums Volume 2. Now, these box sets are a bit controversial in a number of ways, and I will talk about that as we go here. But the story behind these boxes is that these were released in 2004. This first one was released, so I see on the back here. And this one was released in 2006, Volume 2. Now, they only released Volumes 1 and Volume 2. So you only get, for the U.S., these, by the way, these are the U.S. Capitol albums, if you didn't know that already. So you get Meet the Beatles all the way up until Rubber Soul. But obviously, there were unique U.S. releases for Yesterday and Today was a U.S. compilation album, and Revolver, of course, was unique to the U.S. as well. But those later were released in a other box set called the Beatles U.S. albums, which I don't have at the moment, but I'm trying to get my hands on that one as well. But anyway, the story behind these, my own personal story, is that I bought these when they first came out, and I actually kind of like, I didn't really love them when they first came out. I got to be perfectly honest with you. They were okay. But I ended up giving them to my dad because my dad enjoyed them a lot more. He grew up with the U.S. albums. So I ended up not having these box sets. And I just recently, in the last couple of months, have repurchased these. So I got this one first, Volume 1. I got this about a month and a half ago. And Volume 2, this one just came today, in fact. So now I have these box sets again, which I'm happy to have. They're cool to have in the collection. But the thing about these U.S. albums is that they're pretty weird. Now the good thing about these is that they have some unique mixes on here that you can't get anywhere else. So that's very cool. And the other good thing is that they were done very, very well. They were mastered at Sterling Sound, and they were done really well. They're done from the Capitol U.S. master tapes, and generally they were done very, very well as far as the audio goes. There is a big problem when it comes to Volume 2 that we will talk about in a second. But first, let's look at the contents of these boxes. So Volume 1. So my Volume 1 box is in much better shape than my Volume 2. I got both of these used, by the way. The CDs in all of these are all in perfect condition. The boxes, though, they get a little bit damaged. So the one thing right off the bat that a lot of people complain about, and that I agree that it is a complaint, worthy complaint rather, is that the boxes are pretty cheaply made. They're pretty thin. They easily bend. They easily get kind of marked up and stuff like that. And when the CDs come out, I'm not going to do it because they're going to fall out. But if you were to open it up as it's supposed to be opened up, sideways, the CDs will either fall out from the bottom or fall out from the top. So you kind of have to do one of these deals, and then it comes out like that. So then, once you open it, you get this, which folds like this, so you can make it into a CD-sized box. And when you look at the CDs, there they are. You have the CDs on the bottom, and you have a booklet on top. So let's open up the booklet first. The booklets are very, very cool in these box sets, I have to say. They were really, really well done. They're probably the most, in my opinion, the most satisfying visual aspect of the box, the booklets. So they have a lot of, very, very cool photos, typical photos of the Beatles. Not a lot of photos that we haven't seen before, in my opinion, but done really well. A little bit of text. All the text is done by Bruce Spicer, who, of course, he's like an expert on the Beatles' U.S. Releases, and he's written a bunch of great books. So the booklet, very, very cool. Now the CDs themselves. Now, CDs in Volume 1, the actual packaging of the CDs, I think the Volume 2 CDs are done a little bit better, because Volume 1, I don't know if you can see this or not, but on the spines here, they don't say anything. It's just blank. Like a normal record, you would have on the spine, it would say Beatles 65, or whatever the album was. But for some reason on these, they didn't have that. So that's a little bit of an annoyance. And the other thing about these is that the CDs are so loose inside of these sleeves. So the CDs will just fall out, as you can see. You just tilt it and they come falling out. Volume 2, they fixed that. The CDs are way more snug in there, a little bit of a better design. But let's look at the actual CD. So here's Meet the Beatles. Very, very cool US album. And of course, this is how most people in the US first heard the Beatles. And there is the actual CD. They did the Capitol Rainbow label, which is very cool. And like I said, these sound really, really good for what they are. Now that's the key thing to say. So for what they are. So these are almost all of these have been tampered with by the US Capitol Records people. Either in the mastering, well actually always in the mastering. So they've added a little bit of EQ. They've also generally added a lot of extra reverb on some of the tracks. And some of them, of course, more so than others, which we'll talk about as we get to Beatles 65. But in addition to that, of course, they reordered the albums as well. So like on Meet the Beatles, of course, the British counterpart is With the Beatles. The first song on With the Beatles is It Won't Be Long. First song on the US Meet the Beatles is I Want to Hold Your Hand, which makes sense because that was the Beatles' first #1 in the US, so they want to have the big hit to start off the album. And then they also put I Saw Her Standing There on here, This Boy, and then they go on to have the normal With the Beatles song titles, although they took out some of them as well. I won't get into all of that because other people have made really, really great videos about how the Beatles US albums are different than the UK Beatles albums. But anyway, this is Meet the Beatles, and it's really fun to listen to this. I enjoyed listening to this CD. It's really got an electric sound is how I describe it. And for a CD, it sounds really good. And that's a key thing here, that for a CD, it sounds really, really good. Okay, next up, the Beatles' second album, which is one of my favorites of their US albums. Sounds great, and much like Beatles, really fun to listen to as a CD. So there is that. There's the back. I won't show all the CDs because I'll show this one, but I won't show all of them because they all look the exact same with the Capitol Rainbow label. Put that back in there. And then up next is Something New. Now, Something New, this is very cool because it has some unique mixes on here. You get the long version of I'll Cry Instead, which is excellent to have. It has an extra verse in there. So that's very unique to Something New. That mix is also on a couple of other Beatles compilations that happened later on down the road and in other countries. But this is really the main place to get the long version of I'll Cry Instead. And it's always nice to have. And it also has different mixes for And I Love Her. Also, I think Anytime at All, and is also a little bit of a different mix. So you get some unique mixes on here as well. Now, if you want to find out all of the unique mixes that are on these Capitol sets, you can find that information elsewhere. But I'm just kind of giving you a quick rundown of the unique mixes there. So very cool to have Something New. And then the fourth album in Capitol Albums Volume 1, Beatles 65. This is always one of my dad's favorite albums. He would play this a lot when I was growing up. So this is the first way I heard a lot of these songs. And even to this day, it still feels weird for me to hear the song I'll Be Back as the last song on A Hard Day's Night. Even though that's where it belongs, that's how the Beatles wanted it. I'm so used to hearing it on Beatles 65 with all these other songs like No Reply, I'm a Loser, Babies in Black. It's so weird for me to hear it on Hard Day's Night. But anyway, the interesting thing about Beatles 65, of course, is that they added insane, when I say insane, I mean insane amounts of reverb to I Feel Fine and She's a Woman. And they also, in addition, I Feel Fine and She's a Woman on here, even though, so by the way, I forgot to mention this as well. I'm getting ahead of myself. But all these albums have the stereo and the mono mixes of the albums all on one disc all together. So you get the stereo mixes first, and then the album repeats, and you get the mono mixes. But the stereo mixes on Beatles 65 for I Feel Fine and She's a Woman are just the mono mixes reprocessed to sound like fake stereo. So really garbage sound, in my opinion. And on top of that, they added all this crazy amount of reverb to those two songs. There are many people who love the reverb that was added to those two songs. They think they sound great. I think they sound even better than the UK versions. I don't agree with that. While I think the reverb is kind of interesting to hear, and it's neat to own those versions as well, just because they're unique versions of those songs, I much prefer the normal without the drenched reverb versions of those songs. So that's the unique aspect of Beatles 65. So that's Capitol Albums Volume 1. Now, the other complaint with this box set is it's a little bit tricky to get everything back in to where it belongs. So you do that, you get the booklet in there, okay, fine. But now comes the hard part, because when you put these in here, the CDs tend to go flying out. Let's see if I can do it. Oh, I did it. Well, I almost did it. See, that one got stuck. This box set is very frustrating if you are going to listen to it, pretty consistently or as often as you would like. I will say, there were a couple times where I wanted to listen to this, and I actually didn't listen to it just because I was annoyed at having to put it back together. So that's a little bit of a deterrent. And then when you want to put it back in, you gotta be very careful and slide it in, and there it is. So that's Capitol Albums Volume 1. I don't know if I showed you the back or not, but there it is. Now let's get on to Capitol Albums Volume 2. So there are some improvements from Volume 1, but there are also major problems with the audio. Now, I don't know if you heard about this, but when this came out originally, the first couple of copies that came out, how can I describe this? So, like I said, each of the albums has the stereo and the mono mixes on the albums. Well, for the Volume 2, they messed up big time when it came to the mono mixes. So all the mono mixes on here are fold downs of the stereo. They're not the true mono mixes. So fold down of the stereo, for those who don't know, they just took the stereo master and turned it into a mono track. So they just combined the left and the right into one to make it mono. And that is not the proper way to do it, because there are actual mono mixes that were made for these albums that are unique and very cool to have. But they, for some reason, messed up and didn't include those mono mixes. They just included this fold down mix. Well, the box I have has the fold down mixes, which is a little bit of a drag, but I really don't care that much, because I have the mono mixes, the actual original records, if I want to hear those of the US albums. So it's not a big deal, and for some it was a very big deal. And of course, they're advertising that you get the stereo and the mono mix, and to not get the original mono mix, bit of a problem. So that was a big mess up on the part of Capitol and Apple, or whoever was responsible for that. But the thing they did improve is they didn't improve the actual outside box. It's the same exact box, but they did improve the inside box, because now when you open it up, instead of the CDs and booklet coming out of the bottom and the top, it comes out of the middle. So when you take the box out, they don't come flying out right away. So that's good right away. Also, this middle box seems a little bit more sturdy, and that's because they included extra cardboard inside, so everything fits in there very snugly, which I really like a lot. So you open it up, and of course you get the booklet again. It looks almost identical to, actually it looks basically identical to Capitol Volume 1. And again, has a bunch of cool photos we've seen a million times, but that's okay. And again, text by Bruce Spicer. Very cool booklet. I like the booklet. Now, when you get the CDs, like I said, they are in there very snugly, which is nice. They don't come out. And when you pull them out, now, again, it's a little bit tricky to pull them out, just because it's not the best design in the world, but that's okay. We'll get past it. Right away, the improvement, the CDs don't come flying out, so they're snugly fitting inside these, which is very cool. And they added the album names and the Beatles name to the spine. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's very cool. So it's just like a record. And yeah, so let's talk about the actual individual album. So here is the early Beatles, which is, of course, unique to Capitol US version. And basically, this is just like a lot of songs, almost all the songs from the Please Please Me UK album. And the story behind this album is that the Capitol Records bought back from VJ and Swan, or maybe just VJ. They bought back the rights to the Beatles' first album, so they were able to release these songs on Capitol for the first time. And so that's how they made this early Beatles album, which was released in 1965. And yeah, so it's just all the songs from Please Please Me. Not all of them, but most of the songs. Next up is one of my favorites of the US Beatles albums. This is Beatles 6. And this is an album that when I was a little kid, my dad talked about all the time. As it was one of his favorite Beatles albums, but he didn't have it anymore because him and his brother, when they were growing up, they would each buy the Beatles albums. And so when they moved out of the house, his brother took some of the Beatles albums, my dad took some of the Beatles albums, and this is one of the albums that my uncle took. So we didn't have it at my house growing up. My dad would always talk about it. And this is before the internet, so he would just describe to me what it looked like because I was obsessed with the Beatles, like I am now. And to me, this was like the lost Beatles album because my dad would always talk about how great it was, and he would try to tell me about the picture, what it looked like, and I wasn't able to find out what it looked like. And I remember one day walking into a record store and finally finding this album, and just I couldn't believe how cool it was because it was just this long lost Beatles album. So we bought it, listened to it, and I loved it because it has so many songs that I love, including What You're Doing, Yes It Is, Tell Me What You See, Every Little Thing, I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, 8 Days a Week, and of course Bad Boy is on here. And this is the first appearance of the song Bad Boy because the Beatles recorded it for the US market, and it wasn't released in the UK until 1966 on their A Collection of Beatles Oldies albums. So the first place you could get Bad Boy was on Beatles 6. So I've always loved this album. It's just been one of my favorites. And it still is, honestly. I listen to, of all the US albums, I listen the most to Beatles 6 and Rubber Soul, which we will talk about pretty soon. So yeah, it's Beatles 6, a very, very cool one. And again, this has not the actual mono mixes, it's the fold down of the mono mixes, so kind of annoying. But I'm going to move on past it. Okay, and in my opinion, this is one of the most annoying of all the US Beatles albums. This is Help. And I say it's annoying because you only get the Beatles songs that were in the film Help. All the other songs on here are instrumentals from the soundtrack, which don't feature the Beatles at all. And while the instrumentals are interesting and kind of fun to listen to sometimes, generally I don't listen to the US version of Help ever. I have it in my collection. I have a mono and a original mono, original stereo, but I don't really ever pull it out to listen to it. And as far as the CD goes, I'll probably listen to this once just because I haven't heard it in a long time on CD. Yeah, that's Help. And a slight annoyance, in my opinion, is that, of course, originally Help, the US album, it had a gatefold, and the CD does not have the gatefold. It's just a regular sleeve. So it would have been cool if they did the gatefold, but they didn't, so that's okay. Now on to probably the most, for people who bought this Volume 2, this was the most sought after album to have. This is the US version of Rubber Soul. Now, the US version of Rubber Soul is very different from the UK. I'm sure all of you know this, but for those that don't, I'll explain a little bit about it. So, they, as they always did, this is one of the last times that Capitol took a major Beatles album and changed it all around. So they took away Drive My Car. They took away, one of George's songs, If I Needed Someone, they took away. And they took away Nowhere Man. So these are major, major Rubber Soul songs, right? But they took them away, and in their place, they added I've Just Seen a Face, which opens up the album, which is, I know it sounds weird, but that's what they did. They added "I've Just Seen a Face." They added "It's Only Love," both songs from the Help album, of course. Oh yeah, and they also removed Ringo's song that was on the UK Rubber Soul, "What Goes On." So instead, you get this US Beatles album. Now, this is one of the rare cases where they actually kind of made something new and unique, and something that I've always kind of liked as its own thing. Now, that being said, I prefer the UK Rubber Soul. It's just absolutely a classic album. I don't think it should be touched at all. But the US version does deserve some attention because it is very cool and very unique. Opening it up with "I've Just Seen a Face," it really sets this kind of folky acoustic rock mood of the album. And for those of you who don't know, this is the version of Rubber Soul that Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys heard, that blew him away, that influenced him to go on to make Pet Sounds, which then of course influenced the Beatles to make Sgt. Pepper, and you know the whole story. But it was not the UK version of Rubber Soul that he heard. He heard the US version. So it's cool to listen to this and think about what he was hearing. And, you know, obviously he's one of the best songwriters of all time. He's probably, arguably, has one of the best musical ears ever. So he heard this and it influenced him so much that he went on to make arguably his greatest album, Pet Sounds. So owning the US version of Rubber Soul is very important, I think. Now, the big drag about this CD version that I have of Rubber Soul is that, of course, this has not the original mono mix, but the fold down of the stereo, which is very annoying because the mono mix of this Rubber Soul that I have in my collection over here sounds very good, in my opinion. I like the sound of it. As far as for the US albums, it sounds pretty good. So not having it on CD is a little bit of an annoyance, but it's okay. The cool thing about Rubber Soul is that you get one very interesting alternate mix. You get a bunch of false starts on the song "I'm Looking Through You." Actually, I think it's 3 false starts of the acoustic guitar. So that's very cool to hear, and you can only get that on this album. And I think you also get a unique mix of the Word on here. So the Word on here is a unique mix as well. I think there's other unique mixes also on here. It might be Wait or Michelle. I forget which one it is. But anyway, there are unique mixes that you can only get on this US version of Rubber Soul. So it makes it all worthwhile. And I'm just happy to have this in my collection now. But overall, I will say, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, well, do these sound better than like the 2009 remasters? I will say, I think they do sound better than the CD versions of the 2009 stereo remasters. They don't sound better than the CD version of the mono remasters. And they don't sound better than the vinyl versions of the 09 remasters either. But they sound better than the CD box of the 09 remasters. But that's about where it ends. I prefer to just own the original Capitol albums on vinyl. The Rainbow labels, they sound, for what they are, they sound good. And these box sets they're kind of just a novelty, really. You don't really need to own these, except if you want to have these unique mixes that you can only get on these CDs, because the unique mixes are really cool, in my opinion, and I'm having lots of trouble getting these back in the box, as you can see, because that's just how it is for some reason. There we go. Now they're getting back in there. So the unique mixes are worth owning if you're a Beatle freak like I am. And then, of course, from a collector's standpoint, it's very much worth owning because it's the Beatles and you can't go wrong with the Beatles. So, overall, I'm happy to add these to my collection, put them on the bookshelf with my Beatles mono CD box set and the Beatles stereo remaster box set as well. So they'll look cool on the box set, on the box set shelf is what I should have said. So anyway, I'd like to know in the comments below what you think of Capitol Albums Volume 1 and Volume 2. And do you own these? And if you do, how often do you listen to them? What do you think of the sound? And if you own the US CD box set that came out that has all the US versions of the albums, I'd like to know what you think about that. And that's it. I also want to thank all of you that tuned in to my band's live stream that happened this past weekend, this Saturday. We had a lot of fun doing that. It was a lot of fun reading your comments and seeing you all comment as we were playing. And if you want to, if you happen to have missed the live stream or you just want to watch it again, the full live stream with all the songs that we did from it is available on the Anchor and Bear YouTube channel. So you can head over there and check that out. And stay tuned. More records coming soon. I had a little bit of a issue with the U.S. Postal Service, and some of the records that I've been working on and I've ordered are having a little bit of an issue getting here, but I'm working it out. So stay tuned, and that's it for now. So take care, and bye for now.